Okay, so welcome back. In this video, we're going to show how to control a Raspberry Pi remotely, and I'm going to be using a Windows 10 computer on the same network. And I've got here a 3B. You can use it for any other type of Raspberry Pi. And one of the reasons we want to do this is because you can see this is a perfectly running Raspberry Pi. There's no keyboard, no monitor, no mouse, all the wires, you don't have all that. I've only got one wire, one cable coming into this, and it is the 5-volt power from a USB power pack. And this is a 10 amp hour power pack used for smartphones. And basically I got one wire, and this is portable and everything else. So makes it so much nicer if you have a computer you can control it from. So we're going to show how to do that. Now I do have one device here that you're probably not going to have. This is a USB current and voltage meter. And you can see here it's normally drawing 3/10 of an amp on idle, this Raspberry Pi, and about 5 volts, the USB. So we're going to work on a project coming up in the future here where we control some servos with this Raspberry Pi. It'll be nice to be able to measure current and voltage. So I'm going to assume you have a Raspberry Pi, you've got the keyboard, mouse, and monitor to set this up initially, and then you can control it remotely and remove the keyboard, mouse, and monitor. So what we'll do is we'll jump over to the Windows 10 machine and I'll show you how to set that up. Okay, so I'm going to assume you're on your Raspberry Pi, you've got the keyboard, mouse, and monitor hooked up, and you want to figure out how to access it or control it over the network from your desktop computer. So here we are. You should be seeing something like this. Here's all my junk on the desktop. Ignore all that. But up here you can see this VNC, and that's what we're going to be using to access this Raspberry Pi over the network. Raspberry Pi already has this installed, and all you need to do is enable it. There's only really 2 steps to this process. One is on the Raspberry Pi, you enable this VNC, Virtual Network Computing, I think. And then on your desktop, your Windows 10 machine, you're going to have to download a free software from the same company called Real VNC and install that so you can access this. But it's all free, and it's a fairly simple process. So the first thing we're going to do is take your mouse and hover over this network icon, and you can see it says wireless LAN associated with my Wi-Fi network, and you can see the second line, wireless LAN 0 configured, and that's the IP address, 192.168.0.32. All right. Then there's a slash, which you don't need to care about the /24. That just tells what subnet mask. You don't need to know about that. But you will want to make a note of that 192.168.0.32 or whatever yours says. Now, down the last line, it says Ethernet 0 link is down. I don't have an Ethernet cable connected to my Raspberry Pi. You may have that. And it will have a similar thing where it shows you all of this information for both. So, but I'm just going to use the wireless LAN 0, 192.168.0.32. So just make a note of that number and write that down because we're going to need it. One thing I recommend that you do is go to your system tools and package updater. Don't forget to update your Raspberry Pi. It takes a while to do it, but make sure you're all updated. Can't hurt. But the next thing you're going to do is you have to run a configuration program on your Raspberry Pi. So hit this terminal, enter sudo, which is super user, like an admin, and do, which is do this command. So do this as a super user, and you do RASPI-CONFIG, right? And it will give you these configurations for the Raspberry Pi. Go down scroll down with your arrow key to interfacing options. and you will see camera SSH VNC. And that's what you want to do. You want to select VNC. And would you like the VNC server to be enabled? Again, it's already installed. You just need to enable it. Mine's already enabled, but you can hit Tab. It'll probably be no. Go to Yes and hit Enter. And VNC is enabled. Hit Enter and you're done. So go Tab to select and finish. And you're all set. So now you're all set on your Raspberry Pi. You're all done. Now what you need to do is go to your Windows 10 machine and download the associated software called Vnc Viewer. You've got the server enabled. You just need to get the viewer. And again, it's free. And you go to this website. It's realvnc.com, EN Connect. Really just do a Google for Vnc Viewer and you should come up with this. So here's where you download it. And you just select your operating system, Mac, Linux, Raspberry Pi, iOS. Go to your, if you have a Windows machine, go to Windows and then download Vnc Viewer. So now that you've got it downloaded and installed, we're just going to run it. Vnc Viewer, and you will get a window that looks like this. And all you need to do is enter that IP address 192, in my case, .168.0.32, and you can see it automatically connects to the Raspberry Pi. Now, the first time you do it, it's going to ask you for your username, which is probably Pi. And you can see here, it's pi@raspberrypi.com. The default username is Pi, and then whatever password, it's going to ask you for your password, and then you can ask it to save that for the future so you don't keep having to enter your username and password like I've got here. It automatically just starts up and doesn't ask for that. So there you go. You're all set with accessing your Raspberry Pi. Now, one of the issues you may encounter is that it may not always be 192.168.0.32 in my case. You know, you restart your computer, your Windows 10 computer, you may get a different IP address assigned to the Raspberry Pi. Now, what you can do if you followed my previous series of videos where we did a network scanner in C#, we developed a software to scan the network, and here I do a quick scan and it tells me all of the devices on my network, and you can see I've got the Raspberry Pi 192.168.0.40. That's because it's not 32, it's 40, because it's looking at a Ethernet IP, but whatever. But what you can also do is you can configure what's called a static IP address, which means anytime you reboot your Raspberry Pi, it's always assigned the same IP address. I think I'll save that for another video, but basically the benefit is when you start up Vnc Viewer, it's always the same connection, so you'll have this icon here of your previous connections, and you can just double click on it and it'll use the same IP and will always connect. Otherwise, you're going to have to figure out what the new IP is and fill it in here and connect to it. So anyway, hope that helps. Take care and have a really good day. Thanks.